Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Turkiye's Diplomacy. From London to Gaza and from Doha to Madrid, this week has been marked by diplomacy, conflict, and high-stakes negotiations. Donald Trump's second state visit to the UK secured multi-billion-dollar tech and energy deals, even as protests and NATO disputes cast shadows. In Gaza, Israel's latest offensive has left more than 65,000 dead, while a Lancet study warns the true toll may be over 680,000. Today, I'll be discussing the latest developments from Türkiye and beyond with my guests, Dr. Mehmet Çelik and Laurent Lecoeur.
U.S. President Donald Trump was welcomed to Windsor with a royal procession on Wednesday as he kicked off his historic second visit to the UK. Trump and his wife Melania are being hosted by King Charles at Windsor Castle, the oldest and largest inhabited castle in the world. The British Royal Air Force jetted across the grounds in part of what Britain says is its largest military ceremonial welcome for a state visit in living memory. Trump is an overt royal fan and has made little secret of his delight at being not just the first U.S. leader, but the first elected politician to be invited for two state visits.
But this is truly one of the highest honors of my life. Such respect for you and such respect for your country.
But outside the lavish pageantry, the president's visit drew large protests. In London, thousands took to the streets holding anti-Trump posters and Palestinian flags. And in Windsor, a picture of Trump and the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was displayed on a van and on one of the castle's towers, though Trump was not there at the time. Polls show Trump is widely unpopular in Britain, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces plummeting poll ratings of his own, as well as economic woes. Starmer wants further progress on trade after Britain secured the first deal with Trump to lower some tariffs.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mark.
Dr. Mehmet, let's start with this special relationship between the UK and the United States. Now, this is President Trump's second visit to the UK, his second state visit. How are you looking at this relationship, and how significant is it at this point, considering the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I mean, the relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States, as Trump said it last night during their ceremony, is like two verses from the same poem, basically. The kinship and the he said, you know, it would be an understatement to use the word special to describe their relationship. I mean, for the world politics, how the world has been shaped in terms of international politics, in terms of the global history, I think that relationship is a manifestation of that close ties and how they have shaped world history together, contemporary world history. That relationship, if we think of, I think, diplomacy, world diplomacy as one body or one standing man, if the United States is the body, the brain and the head is the UK. I think that would be maybe a simple way to describe not only that relationship, but what that relationship means for the world politics. I mean, Trump received a very kings-like, ceremony. This is something that he really wants because he sees himself as a king, basically, and he received that ceremony. It was one of the largest ever ceremonies, or man being deployed for that, the guards being deployed for that ceremony. It was the largest ever in the UK for a heads of state. In that sense, of course, it was very extravagant, and this is something that Trump's like. But in terms of their relationship, I mean, the U.S. investment to the United Kingdom as part of this visit, the announced amount is 150 billion pounds. So that's a big number. And in return, I think something around 22 billion pounds will be invested in the United States. But they have some important topics on their agenda. Ukraine, I think, would be one of the biggest ones, in addition to the bilateral trade and Trump's tariffs and how Trump wants the Europeans to be on his side when it comes to countering Russia and also imposing some sanctions or tariffs. Some tariffs on China. So in addition to that, I think Ukraine war as two significant actors on supporting Ukraine will be on top of the agenda, especially today when Trump meets the UK Prime Minister Starmer. Because so far the United States and the European countries have not aligned 100%, have not been on the same page fully when it comes to their position on the Ukraine war and how to end the Ukraine war. So that will be a big topic of discussion. The global events such as the tariffs and tariffs against China, I think that will be also discussed. In addition, I think what is happening, the situation in the Middle East, especially the genocide taking place on Gaza, will be on the agenda because the European countries are now planning to recognize Palestine as a state, and they're willing to, and they're taking some steps to impose some sanctions on Netanyahu's cabinet, on Israel, which the U.S. has given unconditional support, basically. Politically, they have political impunity, diplomatic impunity, and they have supported Israel's actions militarily as well as economically. So United States is not only complicit in what's happening in Gaza and the occupied territories, but it's also an active actor in what's taking place there, as it has supported Israel. So those will be some of the key topics that will be discussed. But in terms of their relationship, I think, they come from, they're two different faces of the same body, I would say, just for what the UK and the United States mean in terms of world politics.
Mehmet, you've mentioned about the war in Ukraine. Let's not forget what's happening in Gaza. Over the last few days, Israel is continuing to attack Gaza City. Sources say over 150 air and artillery strikes on Gaza City have been carried out by the Israeli army. 60,000 reservists are taking part in these attacks. How delicate is the situation at this point, Mehmet?
Well, I mean, that delicate situation has been, we have said the situation is very delicate since day one. But the level of atrocities, the level of destruction, the level of killing and using different means as weapons has changed shape and has basically increased and has in a way become more I mean lack of words to describe. Basically, we're saying it's delicate from day one. It is still delicate, but what is that delicacy, what is that delicateness means has also changed. When we were talking about airstrikes on hospitals, airstrikes on schools, now we're talking about mass displacement, now we're talking about starvation, now we're talking about a genocide, which many international NGOs, including the UN institutions, have described this as a genocide taking place. So that level has, of course, increased. Now, with the ground offensive, in the last 24 hours, over 100 people were killed. The death toll, the official death toll, has surpassed 65,000. And many claim that that death toll that is announced and pronounced as 65,000 is only a number that has been counted. What about those who are under the rubble? What about those who have actually died, not from airstrikes or bullets, but have died from starvation, from disease, from other sources of killing or other means of killing, other instruments that Israel has used against the Palestinians. So that number is a very moderate number, very official number. And in war situations like the one taking place in Gaza, that official number means really just the tip of the iceberg, I am afraid. So with the ground offensive, Palestinians are being pushed out, basically, further to south. So there's thousands of people, thousands of people actually being more displaced. During that displacement, there's more death taking place. There's more disease. There's more starvation and hunger taking place. So that delicate moment, it's still very delicate, but the level of it has of course changed. So when we say the situation is critical, the situation has already been critical. When we're saying it's devastating, it's always been devastating. So the words we use to describe the catastrophe in Gaza have lost their meanings for me. I think this is in a way, a little dangerous in terms of explaining the situation, because we have normalized all these extraordinary words to describe what is taking place in Gaza. I mean, genocide, the fact that we use it, now we use it as if it was just another airstrike. A genocide is something not normal. A genocide is something very extraordinary. A genocide, starvation, using food security as a means of starving people is a big war crime. I mean, when we're talking about this, we are in the news bulletins, or when we're reporting, when the journalists or analysts are talking about it, as if this is something that can, we have normalized it so much that by talking about it all the time, and rightfully so, but nothing is changing to stop that. I think this is a big problem, because international community is failing to take any steps against the atrocities. International community is not taking any steps when Israel is expanding the war or its aggressiveness beyond Gaza, beyond occupied territories, because the occupation, the violence, the dispossession and displacement is not limited to Gaza also. We should not forget that East Jerusalem, in West Bank, I mean, the illegal settlements plans are in a way to destroy what is left of the Palestinian territory, to destroy and disconnect from people from one another. But beyond that, Israel has also, attacked Lebanon. Israel has attacked Yemen, Tunisia, Syria, Iran. Qatar was attacked by Israel. Qatar has the largest U.S. airbase in the Middle East. Qatar has very good relations with the United States. Qatar is one of the big purchasers of the U.S. weapons. And that relationship, I mean, Marco Rubio was in Doha earlier this week. Why, if this relationship wasn't seen as an important relationship to the United States, Marco Rubio wouldn't visit Doha. But despite that, Israel is still able to attack a country like Qatar. So, the ground invasion, I think, it will only increase the number of people dying. Of course, the destruction will be expanded. The occupation is expanded. But the fact that Israel has a blank check supported or provided by the superpowers of the world makes the rest really run out of options.
Mehmet, we've been talking about death toll, right? So now the Lancet study, it's a scientific journal, it has released some figures. We've been seeing 60,000, 65,000, 64,000. The number has been increasing, but this is the number that the Western media, the mainstream media is pushing around, right? Because now the number of deaths, it's just a number, whether it's 20,000, whether it's 50,000. Now, I have some facts and figures in front of me. The Lancet says the number of deaths in Gaza currently stand at 680,000. We're talking about more than 500,000 deaths. 136,000 violent deaths and 544,000 indirect deaths from Israel's blockade. Moving on, 35% destruction of buildings, 80% civilian impact per leaked IDF data, and disease surges like a 292% rise in antidepressant use by April 2024. Children account for 50% of the deaths, 340,000, with the total representing 7.9 to 10% of Gaza's population. These are not just numbers now, we're talking about half
This is exactly what I was just saying earlier. That situation that we use in our news bulletins when we talk about them in our analysis, because we have repeatedly talked about them, it sounds like a broken record, and it sounds like as if we have normalized the killing and the starvation and the destruction and the displacement of thousands of people. I mean, since this operation started, thousands and tens of thousands of people are being displaced from their homes and have been walking away from the zones on barefoot to find a safe place. What is next after that? I mean, these are statistics that have stories. They're not just counting apples and oranges. These their families, their people, their lives. I mean, 50% of deaths are children, and perhaps a large number of them are women or civilian men, right? So when we're talking about these, it is mothers, it is daughters, it is sons and fathers that are being killed. These people are not aliens. These people are not some materials. They're lives. They're alive. They have families. They have a history. They have a heritage in those lands. They have a story. They had future plans before October 7, right? But Israel has destroyed all that. I mean, number of children that have lost their arms and legs and amputated is one of the largest in modern history. How this will be resolved? I mean, what kind of future are we looking at when there is so much destruction and so much killing, right? When we are talking about all these children that have lost families, what kind of future are we talking about them? What are we going to talk about for these children when they have, lost basically all family and they're just by themselves now, or they have lost some parts of their body, or they have no home to go? This is what Israel is setting up, and this is what Israel is setting up by the support of the superpowers in the world.
And if you might remember, a few weeks ago, Mehmet, the United States banned Palestinians from entering the United States, and that included people who have been injured. So you can look at these atrocities, you can look at the impunity, you can look at the collaboration that the West has with Israel when it comes to killing these innocent people in the occupied Gaza Strip. Mehmet, that brings me to my next question. Turkish President Erdogan yesterday, he inaugurated the new headquarters of the Turkish Foreign Ministry in Ankara, where he again reiterated that Netanyahu's actions are like Hitler's. Or do you think that his policies and his actions can be seen even more extreme at this point?
Well, I mean, the history was to never repeat again after the Holocaust and what took place during the Nazi Germany period and the World War II. But the history is repeating itself. And this time, but by those, the crimes are being committed by those who have told the world that they were victims for such a long period of time, right? And maybe rightfully so. But now that the victim has turned into the aggressor, they have no story to tell anymore. They are committing the same crimes as those who had committed crimes against them. So where does the justice, how will the justice be served when you're talking about killing and destruction of a people as a whole? And you were the victim yourself at one point. Now, the history will repeat itself at the same time to hold those carrying out this genocide, carrying out this killing accountable. Because the history will bring these people accountable for these crimes to justice. If not today, maybe today it is not happening, but sooner or later, those who are committing these crimes, the international legal frameworks will bring them to account. The consciousness of humanity will bring them to account. When all else fails to bring these people to account, I think their own consciousness will haunt them to for the cries of mothers, the tears of children, the death of fathers and sons in Gaza will haunt them at the time that they expected the least, because the history is being recorded, and in the future when these images are shown, they will have no story to tell to their future generations for the crimes they are committing today.
Indeed, it's very distressing, Mehmet. I was watching a video yesterday where people who were serving food, they ran out of food in their trays, and they're crying, and they're pleading to the international community, please save us, please give us food, please give us the basic necessities. So it's horrifying to see what's happening over there. Anyway, Mehmet, yesterday the Pakistani Prime Minister.
Actually, Omar, we are moving to the next story already, right? Maybe it is going to be a different topic, which rightfully international politics happen elsewhere, and we discuss other issues. But we should never stop talking about what is taking place until that stops. We are talking about it as if we're talking about statistics, or as if we're normalizing. No, we're not. We're going. I mean, the least we can do so that one day when we are asked by future generations, this war was taking place, but what did you do to stop it as an individual? The least we can say, the least we can do is right now is to talk about it, to talk about the injustice there, so that we can actually tell the future generations, look, I had no arms, I had no power, I had no superpowers or sanctions as an individual, as a normal world citizen. I didn't have these powers, right? I wasn't a state myself, but I did talk about it. I think talking about it, we need to keep talking about it. So it is, we move to the next story, but this doesn't mean that we are skipping what is happening in Gaza.
Mehmet, exactly. Last night there was an event in London where there were celebrities, famous journalists. Mehdi Hassan was there as well, and that was the issue that he raised over there at that event, that we must avoid the Western narrative, the narrative that is being spread on mainstream media. We must go out there, study about the facts, research, try to understand what's going there, try to learn the history, because some of the people who have been protesting still don't know about the history. So that's important, right, to know what's been going on. And it's not just since October 7th, 2023, like we've always mentioned, it's decades of Israeli atrocities. So, like you said, we can make a change, but we need to stand for the Palestinians. We need to show the world what's going on.
It is not, standing for the Palestinians is not because we are standing by a certain people. We are standing by those who are, the victims, and we are standing against an injustice. Today it's in Palestine or elsewhere around the world. It's our human duty. It's our duty as a human being to stand against an injustice that is taking place, whether it is near or far. That doesn't matter. Whether it is geographically near me, culturally close to me, religiously, if we are sharing the same religion or not, that doesn't matter. I mean, one of the, I think, atrocities of the West is that when the fire falls near, then they have made it a story. But when it is a distant geography, when it is a distant in terms of religious or political affiliations, they never made it an issue, right? I think this is one of the break points, that the narratives must change, the approach must change to stand by those who are falling victim to this injustice that is happening right now in Gaza. But today it's in Gaza. Yesterday it was in Rwanda, in in Bosnia, in Syria, in Iraq, Afghanistan, no matter where it is. I think when there is an injustice, the simple duty for a human being is to stand against, to voice the disagreement with that injustice. And this makes us human rather than just simple bystanders.
Mehmet, I was going to ask you another question, but since we have limited time, thank you for that analysis. I'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
A Russian drone strike struck a university in Kharkiv, injuring 4, as Zelensky warned Moscow will only seek peace under severe economic pressure.
A Russian drone struck the National Pharmaceutical University in Kharkiv city center, injuring 4 people, Ukrainian authorities said. The only reason Russia can allow all this is that it doesn't feel any pain, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote on social media on Tuesday, reacting to a series of Russian aerial attacks across Ukraine in the past 24 hours. Until Russia experiences truly severe losses above all economic ones, it will avoid genuine diplomacy and an end to the war. With the war grinding on since Russia's full-scale invasion of its neighbor more than 3 years ago, there has been no let-up in Russian strikes on civilian areas of Ukraine and its army's push on the roughly 1,000-kilometer, 620-mile, front line. A settlement to end the war appears to be no closer despite months of U.S.-led peace efforts. U.S. President Donald Trump's ultimatums and deadlines for Russian President Vladimir Putin to engage with proposals to stop the fighting have passed without obvious consequences. Just over the past 2 weeks, Zelensky said on Telegram, Russia has launched more than 3,500 drones, more than 2,500 powerful glide bombs and almost 200 missiles at targets inside Ukraine.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now is Laurent Lecoux, the founder of the Macro Butler. He's joining us from Singapore. Laurent, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Umar. It's always a pleasure to be on Turkey Diplomacy.
Laurent, let's start with Donald Trump and his relationship with Europe. He has said that he would join the EU in increasing sanctions against Russian President Vladimir Putin if NATO countries cut all their oil imports from Russia and impose tariffs of between 50% and 100% on China. Is this a viable solution to confront Russia at this point?
Well, I think that we must take note that a lot of European countries, especially like Hungary and Slovakia, are still highly dependent on Russian oil imports. So it's unlikely that they will give away this Russian oil import in the near term. On top of this, other countries are also relying on Russian oil import. And what President Trump forgot to say is that the US is highly dependent on Russia for uranium imports. So I think that it's unlikely that we see this sanction increasing, at least for the time being. I think that on the other hand, if we want to look at tariff or higher tariff on Chinese goods for European countries, it's also not really a viable situation for a lot of European countries. I mean, the economic situation in many countries like France, Germany are quite dire, and this would add inflation pressure to a situation of a very weak economic growth. So, I mean, this would clearly push Europe further into the stagflation that is already near.
Laurent, how are you expecting China to react to this situation? Is China under pressure?
Well, I think that for China, I mean, if you look and think that we need to look at the numbers. So in terms of export, major trading partner for China today is ASEAN. Around 18% of Chinese exports are done in ASEAN. Then you have 13% down with Europe, and then around less than 10% down with the US. So China has been reorganizing its trade with its neighbors, and especially big countries and ASEAN countries. In terms of the Chinese position, I think that it has been clear that China has not taken part of the Russia-Ukraine war directly, but I would say that China, like India, benefit indirectly because it has been able to import Russian oil at discount to global oil prices. And then if you remember the SCO and the new pipeline that will be built between Siberia and China, this also means that trade relationship between Russia and China will only increase over the next few years. And as I always said, and I may repeat myself here, but what has happened since 2022 and has accelerated over the past few months is that the pressure from the US and from European countries on Russia and China and then India has in fact pushed these three countries to trade increasingly between themselves, and they are creating a new economic triumvirate, which is likely to dominate the economic world by the next decade.
Laurent, so US and Chinese officials agreed to lower investment barriers during their recent talks in Madrid, but tariffs and tech restrictions remain unresolved. Do you think that this is real progress or a temporary pause?
Well, I think that the trade war between China and the US is an ongoing process. I don't really think that we will see a major solution coming in the next few weeks and months. Once again, I mean, the US is trying to buy some time, and on the other hand, China is looking further and is clearly looking at the next step, which will be increase even more its trade relationship with ASEAN, with India, and with the rest of BRICS. And in particular, the next step will probably by increasing trade relationship between China and Africa and South America.
Laurent, TikTok has taken the world by storm, right? And we've been trying to understand what's the future of this application, whether its assets are going to be sold to the Americans or China is going to fully withdraw the application from the United States. Now, they have reached a framework deal on TikTok, and that covers data operations and IP licensing to ease trade tensions. Do you think that this could boost confidence between the two countries when it comes to trade?
Well, I think that TikTok is a good example of the multipolar world and increasing polarization that we see in the world. In fact, if you look at TikTok in China, the TikTok application is called Douyin and has nothing to do with the TikTok that we know outside China. And in fact, we are likely to see the next step would be that the American TikTok will be another entity outside the rest of the world TikTok. So we could even have three TikTok around the world, which has nothing to do between each other, depending on where you live.
Laurent, also, my final question to you is Britain's biggest company, AstraZeneca, has passed a £200 million investment in its Cambridge research site. Now, it says that that's because of regulations, taxes, and the lack of government support. Tell me more about that.
I think that is a good sign that first, it's increasingly difficult for corporates to do business in Europe and in the UK as well. I mean, there are increasing regulation. Economic situation also in the UK and in the rest of Europe is very dire. So I think that you will see even more companies like AstraZeneca reducing investment in the region and trying to diversify themselves outside Europe and the UK to stay relevant. But I would say that the problem for these companies is that companies in China and in India are benefiting from much better regulatory environment to grow. And so, in fact, we are likely to see over the next decade the emergence of new multinationals which are based in China and India, and also potentially in Russia, especially if sanctions one day are left against Russian companies.
Laurent, also President Trump is in the UK, and both of these countries have signed a deal worth over £150 billion. Now, there are agreements on AI, quantum computing, supercomputers, civil nuclear energy. How are you looking at these deals? How are you evaluating these deals for both of these countries? How beneficial could these deals be?
Well, I think that the UK has been one of the first countries to strike a deal with President Trump after Liberation Day. So, I mean, given that a lot of British multinationals have historically been investing in the US, there's quite a close relationship between the two countries. And probably we could see some of British companies being part of the reindustrialization of the US. But the issue that I want to mention here is that British manufacturers are mostly now irrelevant in the world. And if President Trump wants to succeed in the reindustrialization of the US, it will need to attract manufacturers from China, from India, as well as from other Asian countries. And this is far from being a done deal, because there are still a lot of uncertainties and geopolitical tension between the US and the global south in general.
Laurent Lecourt, thank you so much for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you on today's episode of Turkey's Diplomacy.
Thank you, Umar.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, thank you for always being with us in the studio and for that analysis that you just gave us on the occupied Gaza Strip and talking to us about how the Palestinians are feeling, what they're going through, how they're suffering, and also the Israeli atrocities.
Thank you, Umar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.